Hi, I'm Venetia, and I guess you could say this is the part where the truth finally got tired of waiting. My sister called me a loser in front of her husband and laughed like it was the punchline to a joke only they understood. But what they didn't know was, I recorded every word. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd accept being erased from my family photos, their stories, their will. But what if your silence isn't weakness? It's preparation. What if being left out was the best thing that ever happened to me? When the invitation came, it was 2 days late and 3 words short of sincerity. You should come. No time, no place. Just an afterthought text from Seraphine, like she was tossing crumbs from the head table. But I went. Maybe I was hoping Mom had insisted. Maybe I just needed to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I could still show up, unshaken. The hotel was as polished and pretentious as Seraphine liked things. Warm lighting spilled over mahogany floors, and the walls carried that subtle scent of lemon oil and old money. The hostess glanced at the name I mumbled and ushered me past rows of strangers in crisp suits. Then she pointed to a small table near the hallway restroom, just far enough from the main room to hear muffled laughter, but not close enough to join in. My name wasn't on a place card. In fact, there were no place cards at all, only at the head table, where Seraphine sat beaming under candlelight, surrounded by Mom, Dexter, and their curated circle of admirers. I stood still for a moment, uncertain whether to force my way to their table or just take the seat by the bathroom door. I sat. A server passed by without offering water. A toddler tripped near me and was quickly whisked away by her mother, who apologized like I was invisible furniture. My phone buzzed, an ad. I turned it off. From my corner, I watched Seraphine wave at someone behind me, not even pretending it was for me. She laughed, effortless and loud, the kind of laugh that fills rooms and silences insecurities. That laugh had always belonged to her. In school plays, she got the spotlight. I handed out programs. At Dad's funeral, she gave the eulogy. I held Mom's coat. Some people bloom late, Dexter said mid-toast, his voice just loud enough to travel the floor. Some, never. Laughter, small, polite, safe. I sipped my water and smiled like I didn't hear it. They brought out the cake, chocolate mousse, her favorite. Mom raised her glass. To my firstborn, the one who always knew what she wanted and never let anything stop her. A pause. Then she added, unlike some. I didn't flinch. My hands were flat on my lap, fingers threaded so tight they ached. If I'd stood up then, I might have shouted, or cried, or walked out. Instead, I stayed. Later, after a glass shattered somewhere near the dessert tray, I knelt to help a young server pick up the shards. That's when I heard it. Seraphine's voice, flippant and sharp. She's just a loser who couldn't keep up. I only invited her because Mom guilt-tripped me. I froze. The girl next to me kept picking up glass. I didn't move. She thinks showing up makes her relevant, Dexter added with a chuckle. Laughter followed. The same tone they'd used in high school when I wore hand-me-down jeans Seraphine had outgrown. The same cadence. Only now, I was a grown woman, crouched near a cake table, listening to my own bloodline laugh at my worth. Without thinking, I slipped my phone from my purse, thumbed the record button, and held it low. The voices kept coming. I didn't cry. Not then. I just pressed save and slipped it back into my bag like a relic. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't wait for cake. I walked out through the lobby, past the hostess, who blinked like she wasn't sure if I was arriving or leaving. Outside, the river air clung to my skin, heavy and silent. I didn't have a plan. I just walked. I followed the path along the water, past the slow-moving couples, and jazz spilling from open-air restaurants. My heels clicked unevenly against the cobblestone, echoing behind me like a question. When I finally stopped, it was under the cast-iron railing that lined the Savannah Riverwalk. I replayed the audio. Just once. I watched the waveform bounce as her voice called me a loser. I watched Dexter laugh, and something inside me, Something buried beneath years of trying to be the easy daughter shifted. I wasn't angry, not the kind that screams. I felt hollow, clear, like cold glass holding fire. I had spent years waiting for them to see me. Now I was ready to make sure they couldn't look away. Back at my apartment, the silence pressed harder than the savanna humidity. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort. It suffocates. I kicked off my heels and let my purse slump to the floor beside the couch. My phone, still in my hand, buzzed once. Nothing important. I didn't check it. I hadn't replayed the recording yet. Didn't need to. Her voice, "She's just a loser who couldn't keep up," was tattooed inside my ears now. That laugh, his chuckle, the way the room kept eating while I evaporated in plain sight. I opened my laptop and clicked into a file I hadn't touched in months. Letters I'll never send. The cursor blinked, waiting. I typed, "I wish they saw me." Then I just sat there. Words didn't come easily tonight. Scrolling through old documents, I landed on the shared family photo album Mom had emailed everyone for the holidays. It was still there, untouched. I opened it. Seraphine and Dexter were everywhere. Birthday parties, ski trips, their kids' kindergarten graduation, glossy, posed, perfect. There was one photo of me, barely, from 5 years ago, during a 4th of July barbecue. I was half-turned, blurry, cropped at the edge. No caption, no tag. Like an accidental shadow caught on film. I closed the album. I wasn't erased tonight. I had been vanishing for years. Later, when the city outside my window had dimmed and the air had cooled, I found myself thinking back to a moment from earlier that evening, before the loser comment. It hadn't fully landed at the time, but now it clawed its way to the front. Dexter had introduced me to a group of his colleagues during the dinner. Seraphine, of course, had swooped in quickly with a laugh and said, "Oh, this is Venetia. She's from the other side." The room chuckled. Someone murmured, "Ah, gotcha," as if that explained everything. She didn't clarify. She moved on. And so did everyone else. From the other side, like I was a distant relative. An in-law, maybe. A footnote, not her sister. I'd smiled then. Tight. Automatic. But now, hours later, that moment burned hotter than the insult that followed. She didn't just call me a loser. She'd already stripped me of being family. That night, unable to sleep, I rummaged through a drawer filled with scrap memories. Postcards from places I'd never been. Trinkets from events I never got invited to. Near the bottom, I found an old journal I hadn't touched in over a year. I flipped through pages filled with half-started entries and fragments of things I'd been too cautious to say aloud. Near the end, I wrote, "They've always seen me as excess baggage. I kept thinking if I stayed quiet, they'd eventually realize I was essential. Turns out, silence just made me easier to overlook." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I turned the page. In bold, across the top, I wrote, "I am not invisible, not anymore." The words didn't tremble. Neither did I. And if they won't remember my name in their family, I'll make sure they never forget it outside of it. I didn't sleep that night, not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't let myself. There's a difference. Sleep is surrender, and I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. I stayed up drawing numbers on scrap paper, budgeting what little I had left after rent, groceries, and a few emergency savings. It wasn't much, but it was something. Enough to offer Seraphine a clean start with her debt. By dawn, I had typed out a neat financial plan. I labeled it, "One Last Offer." Half of my savings, just over $3,400, was set aside in a shared account I reopened under both our names. I sent the email to Mom, explaining everything in plain terms. I didn't embellish, didn't guilt her, didn't beg for approval. Just facts. A daughter trying one last time to matter. Then I waited. An entire day passed. No response. By evening, I checked again. Nothing. No acknowledgement, no thank you, not even a seen receipt. Just digital silence. It was past noon the following day when my phone finally pinged. A single text. No greeting, no punctuation. You should learn to live like your sister. Stop creating messes. I stared at it long enough for the screen to go dark. My thumb hovered above the reply button, but I didn't move. There was no misunderstanding this time, no way to spin it, no misread tone. It wasn't meant for Seraphine. It wasn't advice. It was a verdict. A full-body stillness came over me, like grief that had finally settled into bone. I didn't cry. I didn't delete it. I just placed the phone face down and sat there, blinking into the stillness of my apartment. That evening, as I sorted through my mail, most of it junk, I found a cream-colored envelope addressed in Mom's neat, slanted handwriting. My birthday had been 3 days ago. I hadn't expected anything. Still, I opened it. Inside was a Hallmark card with roses and glitter. The message inside read, "You've always made us proud." But the ink didn't match. My name was written in black ballpoint. The rest was printed in blue. And above the signature, in faint pencil, I could see another name, Seraphine's, erased, but not entirely gone. A ghost under the paper. She'd reused a card meant for my sister. Recycled it like a grocery bag. There was no anger, no explosion. Just something inside me exhaling for the first time in years. I walked to the kitchen, holding the card gently. Not with reverence, but like you hold something fragile you no longer fear breaking. I dropped it into the trash can, resting it atop an empty yogurt cup and yesterday's coffee grounds. It made no sound, just disappeared. That night, I sat on the floor with an old shoebox of birthday photos. Seraphine at age 9, unwrapping a giant Barbie dream house. Me at 8, blowing out candles on a cupcake. Seraphine with a horse, a piano, a pink bike. Me with a book once. I don't remember the book. I only remember pretending I liked it because Mom looked so proud handing it to me. I spoke into the empty room, voice calm and certain. I don't think I was ever the daughter she wanted. It didn't feel bitter. It felt like fact. I stood, picked up the shoebox, and slid it into the hall closet. Top shelf, far back. Out of reach, but not forgotten. And if blood couldn't make me matter, maybe truth would. The message came through while I was heating leftover soup. An Instagram DM from a name I hadn't seen in over a decade. Eliza Caldwell, freshman year roommate, 1 semester only. Back when I still thought people would form opinions based on their own experiences, not someone else's storytelling. "Hey," it started. "I know this is random, but I owe you an apology." I stood there, phone in one hand, spoon in the other, soup simmering into vapor. Eliza continued, "I used to believe what your sister said about you. Back then, I didn't think to question it. I was wrong. You deserved better." I sat down without realizing it, still reading. "She made it seem like you were unwell, said you were volatile, irresponsible, that she was trying to keep you from self-destructing." I stared at those words, cold and exact. My fingers scrolled further. Screenshots followed, emails, group chats, even a post in a closed alumni Facebook group, Seraphine painting me as unstable, financially erratic, and estranged by choice. I recognized the tone immediately. Calm, persuasive, rooted in just enough truth to be dangerous. I knew her style. She didn't scream or accuse. She implied, let the audience fill in the blanks. And they had. Friends I'd stopped hearing from after college. Professors who'd grown distant. I thought I'd been drifting apart. Turns out I'd been pushed. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain felt sterile, like something pre-packaged, already processed. I wasn't even angry, not yet. I was just stunned by the efficiency of it. That evening, while folding laundry, another notification popped up, this time from an old family email thread. Zoom recording available. Family asset discussion. I hadn't been invited to any family Zoom calls. I clicked the link. The recording started mid-conversation. Seraphine's voice came through first, polished and confident, always at the center. "I think it's cleanest if we don't split the lake property," she said. "It's not like Venetia ever used it." Then Dexter. "Right. Legally, if she's not active on the trust, it weakens the tax strategy anyway. And Mom, Imelda, chimed in with finality. It's better not to burden Venetia with these matters. She's not equipped for it. I paused the video, sat back. They were rewriting me again. Not just in stories they told acquaintances or college roommates, but in legal documents, family decisions, property discussions. I was no longer just inconvenient. I was disposable. I didn't finish the soup. I didn't fold the rest of the clothes. I opened a blank folder on my desktop and named it Phase 1, Truth. Inside, I saved the screenshots from Eliza, the Zoom recording, and a notepad file with timestamps. I wrote a short line at the top. If they're building a case without me, they better know. I'm building mine with receipts. Later, I stepped out onto the balcony, wrapped in a sweater I didn't remember buying. The night was still. The streetlight flickered just enough to remind me the world didn't stop when yours cracked in half. They made their case behind closed doors. Now it's time I prepare mine, with evidence. 2 days after saving the Zoom recording, I made an appointment with Mr. Ellison, our family's attorney since I was 11. I didn't tell him much over the phone, just that I needed to clarify some estate items. He didn't sound surprised. He knew how my family worked. Or didn't. His office hadn't changed since Dad's funeral. Same dusty bookcases, same grandfather clock that clicked just loud enough to remind you time was passing. He greeted me with a tight smile and a legal pad. "I take it this is about your father's will?" he asked. "I'd like to see the most recent version," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He nodded, opened a folder, and slid a copy across the desk. I skimmed until I saw it. My name. Or rather, the space where it used to be. Removed 3 years ago, replaced with Dexter's. Was this change made after Dad passed? I asked, already knowing the answer. No, Ellison said, eyes flicking to me. It was signed a month before. Your mother was present for the update. That was the same month Seraphine took over everything. Hospital visits, hospice care, funeral planning. I wasn't allowed to help. Mom told me, he needs calm, not confusion. And I listened, like always. I left Ellison's office in silence, walked 3 blocks to a coffee shop, and sat at a corner table near the window. My reflection stared back from the glass. Older, sharper, not quite so easily dismissed anymore. Later that evening, I opened a news link a coworker had forwarded. Women in Power, How Seraphine Del Rey Built Her Real Estate Empire from Nothing. The article gushed over her recent luxury apartment purchase, her self-funded resilience, her humble beginnings. I stared at the photo of her standing on a sleek balcony, wine glass in hand. The address caught my eye. It was the same property we'd scouted together 5 years ago. Back then, she said she needed a business partner, just to secure the bank approval. I'd signed on as a silent co-investor. She said she'd close the account once she got her footing. Turns out, the account was drained. The apartment deed had her name only. Mine never appeared. I pulled the old contract from my file box and highlighted the transaction ID. She hadn't even bothered to close it properly, just transferred everything out quietly and let it rot. I wasn't angry. I was surgical. That night, I drafted a letter with the help of a legal contact I trusted more than Ellison. Simple, direct. To Seraphine Del Rey and Dexter Venor. Any further public or private reference to my identity, financial status, or contributions, past or current, will be regarded as defamatory. This is your formal and only warning. All relevant documentation has been preserved and time-stamped. I had it sent certified, with RID receipt. Then, I sent a message directly to Seraphine. Take me lightly again, and I'll make sure no one else ever will. The response came 3 minutes later, a laughing emoji, followed by, "You're still dramatic, V." No punctuation, just that tone, the one she's always used when brushing me off, like I was a mosquito buzzing near her wine glass. But that laugh was the match. What she didn't know was that the fire was already spreading. It started with a ding from my credit monitoring app while I was sipping coffee, scrolling headlines. At first, I assumed it was a routine update, but when I opened the notification and saw my score had dropped nearly 80 points overnight, I froze. I hadn't missed a payment. I hadn't opened a new account. Something was off. I called the bank. 20 minutes of hold music and robotic menus later, I was transferred to a representative who confirmed what I feared. A personal loan, $14,000, had defaulted under my name. Opened 4 years ago. No payments made since the second month. Collections had been quietly chipping away behind the scenes. I didn't take out that loan, I told her flatly. It was digitally signed, she said. We can send you the application packet. I asked for the email tied to the file. It was mine. Or rather, an old one I hadn't used in years. One Seraphine once had access to when we were working on that short-lived joint venture she swore would help us both level up. I ended the call, pulled open my external hard drive, and started digging. Emails, screenshots, Venmo transactions, casual messages from Seraphine like, "Just need you to sign the initial stuff for the LLC. Won't affect anything long-term." Another one, "You trust me, right? You're the only one I can count on." I filed them all into a new folder, named it Financial Fraud, Internal Only. Next, I reopened the voice memo file. Her laugh. The word loser. The tone that hadn't changed since we were kids playing Monopoly, and she insisted on being the banker. I trimmed the clip, cleaned the background noise, and added a timestamp. I uploaded it anonymously to Dexter's firm's compliance hotline. Subject: Client Integrity Risk, Urgent. Attached: Audio file, short transcript, voice print verification. No explanation, no accusation, just evidence. Then I deleted the original recording from my phone. Not out of fear, but because I didn't need it anymore. It was already in motion. That night, I walked the edge of River Street, hands in the pockets of my coat. Tourists laughed near the candy shop. A saxophone played something slow and familiar. Boats creaked against the dock. They had no idea what had just begun. I checked my email. There it was. The anonymous submission had been received. Status: read. I sat on a bench and watched a young couple argue quietly a few feet away. Something about a missed dinner reservation and too many expectations. I used to think that kind of drama was the peak of betrayal. Until I learned what betrayal looks like when it comes in the form of a signature you never gave, a loan you never took, a sister you thought might change. I whispered into the breeze, not expecting a response. Let's see if they still laugh by Monday. The storm didn't start when I sent the clip. It started when they assumed I'd stay quiet. By the fourth day, I still hadn't heard a word from Dexter's firm. No email, no "thank you for your submission." Nothing. But silence has a tone. It was different now. It hummed in the background, tense and wary. It reminded me of the way people walk past a dog they once thought was chained, unsure if it still is. I told myself I didn't need a confirmation. I already knew I'd hit the right nerve. Still, part of me itched to see the fallout, to know they were squirming. So when I texted Mom, asking if I could drop off a box of old letters, and she responded with, "If you must," I didn't hesitate. I packed a few loose envelopes I hadn't looked at in years, tucked them into a recycled gift bag, and drove the 20 minutes to her house in silence. The house looked the same from the outside. White columns, brick steps, boxwood hedges trimmed just enough to suggest discipline, not warmth. Inside, it smelled of potpourri and lemon cleaner. She didn't hug me, didn't offer tea, just pointed toward the dining room and said, "Leave it there." I didn't. I stepped further in, past the entryway, toward the living room where the family altar was. That display had been up since I was a kid. Framed photos, faded school portraits, one black and white wedding picture of her parents, and, most recently, Seraphine's perfectly posed Christmas card with Dexter and the twins. But mine? Gone. Not even the old snapshot from my college graduation. Just blank space where a frame used to hang, now replaced by a ceramic angel holding a quote about strength and sacrifice. I turned toward her. "Did my picture fall?" She didn't blink. "You never gave us a reason to display you." It landed softer than I expected, like a dull blade. But it cut all the same. She walked past me toward the kitchen, voice trailing off. "Are you staying for dinner or just dropping the box?" I followed without answering. Dexter was already seated at the table, scrolling through his phone like it owed him something. He looked up when I entered, smirked. "Well, look who came out of hiding. Rare to see ghosts before Halloween." I sat without reacting, looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Some ghosts speak louder than the living." He flinched. "Not a lot, but enough." Mom broke the silence by announcing dinner. Chicken pot pie, overcooked as always. No one asked me questions. No one passed me the salad. I ate slowly, methodically, pretending each bite was a form of protest. Afterward, as they moved to the living room, I lingered behind. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and took a single photo of the family wall. No flash, no sound. I sent the photo to myself, added it to a folder labeled Cultural Exclusion, Visual Evidence. I had no idea if I'd ever use it, but I knew better now than to let moments like this go undocumented. Before leaving, I turned to Mom. "You always said blood matters, but maybe it only matters when it behaves the way you want." She didn't respond, just picked lint off her sleeve like my words had already turned to dust. As I stepped out onto the porch, the early evening air was thick with summer stillness. I didn't look back. They could erase my image, but they would never erase my impact. They thought the wall made me disappear. I was about to show them how walls crumble. Rain tapped lightly against the kitchen window as I pulled the last cardboard box from the top shelf of my hall closet. I'd been meaning to go through these for years. Old tax forms, letters I never mailed, the occasional Polaroid curling at the corners. I wasn't searching for anything in particular, but when you're unraveling lies, every forgotten drawer starts to feel like a potential landmine or a matchstick. Halfway through the pile, I found a leather-bound journal, worn, cracked at the spine, and unmistakably Mom's. I'd assumed it was lost during her last move. Somehow it ended up in my stack of things she never bothered to reclaim. I didn't read it right away. I poured coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened it like it might burn me. Most pages were benign, lists, half-written grocery items, sermon notes, reminders. But toward the back, tucked between two scribbled recipes, one page had been torn out and folded in half. The handwriting was hers. Tight. Neat. Venetia was the mistake I never had the courage to admit. I reread it 4 times before letting the weight settle. Not disappointment, not criticism. Mistake. I folded the page back and slid it into a file marked Personal Evidence. Later that morning, a message lit up on my phone. "Dexter. You could have won, V, but you never knew how to play." He thought that was clever. Part gloat, part confession. I took a screenshot, added it to the folder, labeled it Arrogance, time-stamped. They thought my silence had been ignorance. It was strategy. By noon, I was staring at the group chat our extended family used once, for Dad's funeral arrangements. It had been dormant since. Quiet. Like the photo wall, only digital. I typed, "This is who you chose. This is who you erased." Then I attached the audio clip of Seraphine laughing, saying, "She's just a loser," the screenshot of Dexter's message, a photo of the journal page, the word mistake highlighted, and I pressed send. It took 13 minutes before the first response. Cousin Marianne. "This changes everything." Then my Aunt Lorna. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." I didn't answer. I wasn't looking for apologies anymore. I powered off the chat, left my phone face down, and stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The pavement was still damp, the kind that slicks the edges of leaves and makes the world smell clean but unsettled. I walked, past the bakery, past the tailor who always waved from behind his dusty window. I passed them all without speaking. By the time I reached the edge of River Street, The clouds had lifted just enough to show the sun fighting its way back. I leaned against the railing and closed my eyes. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, then stopped. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel erased. I didn't want revenge. I wanted acknowledgement. But in chasing it, I found something better. The news didn't come from Seraphine, or Dexter, or even Mom. It came in fragments, forwarded emails, texts from distant cousins, a LinkedIn status someone screenshotted and sent with no subject line. Dexter had been placed on leave. Ethics investigation, the message said. No details. Just the kind of silence that means something's rotting behind closed doors. Seraphine? Gone from social media. Accounts deactivated. Website under construction. The photo she once posted of her balcony view, the same one she bought with my name, had vanished like it was never there. And Mom? Imelda hadn't said a word, not a call, not a text. According to my aunt, she'd canceled church group the past 2 weeks and hadn't answered her door. I sat at my kitchen table, phone face down beside me, and stared at the steam rising from my tea. I felt still, not happy, not victorious, just still. Later that day, I pulled out the drawer beneath my desk and retrieved the letter I'd written weeks earlier. Addressed to Mom. Unsent. The envelope was blank, the handwriting inside careful but firm. I waited years for a version of you that would love me out loud, it began. There were no accusations, no grand revelations, just truth, my truth, about growing up in the shadows, about watching Seraphine being celebrated while I was quietly managed, about the weight of always being the problem when I hadn't even had a voice. I folded it again, slipped it back into the drawer. I didn't need to mail it anymore. The closure wasn't in her response. It was in finally saying it for myself. 2 days later, I drove out to where my father was buried. The cemetery was quiet, just a few cars parked near the chapel. I brought a small wooden frame with me, blank inside. No picture, no inscription, just space. I placed it gently at the base of his headstone. You saw me the last time we talked, I whispered. I just wish you'd written it down before you left. I stood there longer than I expected, not waiting for a sign, just letting the silence wrap around me like something earned. By the time I returned home, my inbox had a message waiting. Subject line: consultation opportunity, emotional inheritance disputes. A women's legal advocacy group had seen the anonymous post. They asked if I'd be willing to speak, just informally, about my experience. Help others recognize what it means to be written out emotionally, not just legally. I said yes. Not because I needed attention, but because maybe now I could help someone see themselves before they disappeared from their own story. Later that week, I stood in my apartment, looking at the wall I'd started building near the hallway. A few framed photos, me at college, a candid one with a friend on a hike, my first apartment key mounted inside a shadow box. None of them were from my family, but they were mine. My family may never put my picture back up, but I've already built the wall where I belong. Sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the one that sees you clearly. It's the one that teaches you how to see yourself. I spent years hoping they'd call my name with pride, hang my picture on their wall, write me into their stories. But in the end, I realized the most powerful story I could tell was my own. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who should know you best, let this be your reminder. You are not erased. You are not forgotten. You are not a mistake. Have you ever been made to feel like an outsider in your own family? How did you reclaim your place, your voice, your worth? I'd love to hear your story. If this video touched you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't resonate, I'd still like to know why and how your story is different. And if you'd like more stories that speak to the quiet strength in all of us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your voice belongs here too.